pretty good turnout. So I think I know most everybody here. Steve Drazkowski from Mazeppa. Fellow Mazeppa, you see? Come to see you guys down there. I think what we envision tonight, and certainly both Mike and I are here to take any questions, and Cindy, additional things you want to talk about. We're kind of twofold. One, maybe do kind of an overview of what happened this last legislative session and where we are at. And normally I have done about 8 different, at least each of the last 3 years, I've done 8 different town hall meetings after sessions and done throughout the district. And I didn't do any this year because I was waiting and waiting for that special session and the tax bill that never happened. And so the idea is, well, let's get through and get the special session done, because very much of what would have been accomplished this last year was encompassed in the tax bill that the governor vetoed. So I'll just start with kind of my recollection of where we've gone and what's happened so far, and kind of where that leaves us as a state. To begin with, just maybe a reminder for people, and Mike and I were talking, in 13 and 14, the Democrats had full, I like to call it full throttle control of the legislature. They had full control of the House and the Senate and the governor. So there was not an alternative idea to stop them in any of those areas, and so they had full access to implement their ideology, and they did. You remember very well $2.1 billion tax increase that we didn't need, and they passed it. They increased taxes dramatically, taking the upper bracket income taxes from 7.85% to 9.85% or 9.75%, wherever it's at. It was for a while the highest income tax by a state in the country. Now I think it's either second or third, Hawaii or somebody. Are we third? Okay. There's something to brag about. We're only third now. Only third. So somebody else, some socialist ideas in another state came along and took over there too. That big tax increase, and we talked about that the last couple of years here. You remember there was a farm repair tax for farmers, the first sales tax on farm repairs that we've seen in this state. It was passed. There was a tax on warehouse space, a sales tax on warehouse usage. There was a tax on estate gifts on estates that affect farmers, businesses, and others that want to transfer their estates. And it's interestingly enough, we got through that first year of that session, and then the next year they came back and repealed those particular taxes, which were about $300 million of the $2.1 billion tax increase that they passed. And they repealed them because the feedback was so strong from the rural area, and they knew that the slim majority that they had in the House, or a lot of the majority capability that they had in the House, was not only their core metro delegation, because remember, in Minnesota, in Minneapolis and St. Paul, every legislator, and I don't remember, do you remember, Mike, how many Senate members are from Minneapolis and St. Paul? But there's probably just total in the geography of Minneapolis and St. Paul. In the House, there's got to be 20 or 25 members from Minneapolis and St. Paul, something like that. It's a large number. And every single one of them is a Democrat. Every single one. We have 0 Republican members from Minneapolis and St. Paul. So that's important to remember, whether you're talking about the House or the Senate. It's the same type of situation. And back then, the Democrats, after passing that tax with these impacts on farmers, realized, when they got the feedback from the rural area, that they had, and actually we learned and thought and believed, were renting some Democrat or some rural seats. They were renting some rural seats from Republicans, seats that we believe should have been ours. As a matter of fact, in the next election, which happened in 2014, we captured many of those seats, 10 of them, and took back the majority in the Minnesota House. So that dynamic was well at work, and they sensed that sensitivity to these dramatic increases in the rural area, and they backed off, even with full Democrat control of the Senate, the House, and the governor. So that's what happened back in 13 and 14. By the way, so the other taxes in there, they increased the cigarette tax from $1.23 a pack to $2.83 a pack. Somebody do the math on that real quick. That's like 100 and something percent increase. And there were a variety of other taxes in there. Mike, do you remember the other ones? But a variety of taxes, and the biggest portion, of course, was that tax on the upper income bracket. And they suggested, you know, let's tax the rich and make them pay their fair share and all of this. And we saw after that, and we're still seeing people fleeing this state because of the high taxes that we have. Congressman, how are you? He might be on a schedule, Cindy. Jim, do you have to be anywhere soon?
Oh, I'm always happy to listen to you talk, Steve.
No, but I only have like a hop, skip, and a jump to go, and you probably have further.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll speed up. I don't want anybody to fall asleep here. So anyway, the income tax was the biggest fiscal impact of that $2.1 billion tax increase, which was later pared down to $1.8 billion. And what that did in the push that it had, and as we look at this, you guys, think about this, and I think about it often and talk about it often. We have this huge government in the state of Minnesota that has grown 500% in the last 50 years after you adjust it for inflation and population growth. So after you adjust the increase for inflation growth and population growth, it's a 500% increase in the size of state government. So we have this huge government, and the people paying the bulk of it are fleeing to southwest Florida, especially, and other places. And there's studies on this that shows that's the most popular place for people from Hennepin County. The rich part of Hennepin County, out western Hennepin County, is that very southern Florida. But we're chasing away the wealthy people. We're chasing away the wealth, and we're continuing to import poverty at faster and faster rates. You hear about the refugee resettlement program. You hear about people being imported from Chicago and Milwaukee and other places because we have the most numerous and generous welfare benefits probably of any state in the country, as far as we can tell. Anyway, I went down a rabbit hole, and I'm coming back up for air here. So that's what happened back in 13 and 14. They passed that. They passed MNsure. Now, you heard about MNsure? Everybody heard about that? It's getting kind of hot out there for the Democrats, and we're pouring gas on it as much as we can. So, and wood, as wood burns longer. So they passed MNsure just like they did in Congress when they passed the Unaffordable Care Act. The same thing happened in Minnesota when we implemented MNsure, which is Minnesota's implementation of the Unaffordable Care Act. And what they did is passed it without a single Republican vote. And they did the same thing here in Minnesota. We had all kinds of amendments and ideas we brought forward, some accountability for MNsure, to bring in some experts in health care. Those were all rejected in favor of this very rampant ideology that they wanted to implement, which is now hitting them, and unfortunately, most unfortunately, Minnesotans over the head with premium increases that are out of this world. On top of that, if you haven't heard, Blue Cross Blue Shield has left the individual market in Minnesota. So when competition decreases, prices increase. Yeah, of course, the Democrats don't understand that. So that's the issue here. In addition to that, what we just heard with these recent reports that came out of the recent reports of the premium increases, which are somewhere this next year projected to be between 50 and 67% increase, following a year when it was a 49% increase, and it was double digits again yet the year earlier than that. But what we're seeing now and the governor and the MNsure executives gave permission to the insurance companies to cap their offerings of insurance policies. So what we call that is health insurance rationing. We're not even sure if all the people that need to get insurance over the next year are going to be able to get them because it appears, and I don't have the numbers before me, but if you're available on Thursday night this week in Red Wing at the American Legion at 7 o'clock, we're having a emergency health insurance MNsure town hall meeting. Representative Matt Dean, who's chair, a colleague of mine in the House of the Health and Human Services Finance Committee that understands this stuff inside and out, will be there. He'll be able to describe a lot of this in much more detail and maybe even a little bit more accuracy than I, and be able to answer your questions with great precision. So I encourage you to come. It's Thursday at 7 at the American Legion in Red Wing, which is, you go into the Red Wing and you take a left and then you take another left and you're pretty close, right, Mike?
Right across the street from the Wells Fargo.
Okay, right by Wells Fargo. So
Kitty corner from the City Hall.
yep, right in that part of Redmond. So, so they passed MNsure. They passed gay marriage. They passed a bullying bill that bullied students and parents in favor of, again, an ideology, far left radical ideology that's rampant in this administration, that was rampant in the voracious appetites of the liberals to run this stuff through. Very many regulations that they brought in the area with the DNR and the MPCA. They even attempted to take away the public's recourse in the administrative rulemaking process with the MPCA and the DNR. So we wouldn't be able to provide input, they'd just be able to carte blanche do this without many of the hearing opportunities and other things. Big government gone wild. So that was then. So we had an election in 2014, and we took control of the House. So the House went from 72 Democrats to 62 Republicans to 72 Republicans and 62 Democrats, and then we gained one more Republican in a special election. It's at 73 to 61 right now, and the Senate is 39 Democrats to 28 Republicans right now. So that's kind of the condition we go into this election with. So we had this last biennium that just ended, the end of, at least the legislative biennium ended the end of May, or 20th or 22nd of May. The first year of the biennium is a budget setting year, right? We entered that with a $1.9 billion surplus. Now, $1.9 billion surplus, in just the biennium before they raised taxes by $1.8 billion. Yeah, they didn't really need that tax increase, did they, Mike? And a little bit of a coincidence there, and we told them they didn't need the tax increase, but the economy did improve at the same time. We started then in January of 2015 with a $1.9 billion surplus, and Republicans and Democrats with different ideas on what to do with it. And what we ended up with was we ended up with a proposal in a tax bill to cut taxes by $2.2 billion. So $1.9 billion plus about $300 million in additional cuts that we had in our proposal. They came forward with all kinds of spending ideas to spend it all. And what we ended up with was spending about half of it in a tax bill that did not get addressed. And that's what happened in 2015 session. So we come forward to the so the budget was set, and by the way, that budget was, again, not as large of an increase as the Democrats passed in 13 and 14. Theirs was about a 12% increase in spending across the two-year biennium. Ours was about an 8% increase in spending across the two-year biennium. Still a large increase, way too large increase, but less and no tax increases. By the way, in 13 and 14, you know what their next tax was they were going to raise that they didn't? The beer tax. They wanted to take the beer tax from $4 a barrel to $28 a barrel. Now run the numbers on that one. Like 600 and something percent or something like that. Yeah, but their appetite is insatiable. So anyway, sorry to digress, but I had beer on my mind. It's been a long day, Jim. So we began then the 2016 session after the whole budget had been set, right? So the way we work in Minnesota is the odd year, which was 2015. We set the budget, and we set it for a full 2 years, so it goes around the calendar twice, right? So when we started here in January of 2016, we didn't have to accomplish anything. If we adjourned on the first day, which I would have made that motion, Bill. I don't think our speaker wanted that, but we wouldn't have done any more damage for sure. But when we called it to order on the first day, we could have adjourned, and the world would not have stopped. The government would have had its full funding that it was provided, and nothing, other than the liberals crying because they get more chances to spend more money and do more things to us. So anyway, we went through the session. Our eyes were fully on that tax bill. Now that tax bill, I had the fortune, the honor, and the privilege of being the chair of the property tax committee in the House. The first thing we did is we went around the state and did listening sessions at about 10 or 11 locations and heard from people about what their issues were on property taxes. The number one and number two things we heard is number one, farm property taxes for school construction levy taxes are killing the farmers. Now, two things had propagated that. Oh, I thought more one of the things the Democrats did was two things have propagated that. One is the session before the Democrats had given school boards the authority, in other words, taken away voter authority around $724 per pupil to raise taxes. Do you remember that? So they basically said, Bill, you can't vote on that $724 tax increase. The school board can just do it with their 5 members or however many they have and do a vote. We're not going to do a referendum on that. So that was what that legislature did. We saw property taxes spike dramatically because of that, and the farm property taxes went up not only because of that, but because we had continued to see escalation in farmland value, which exacerbated the situation for farmers. Anyway, so the two things we heard is the farm impact of the school construction levy and the state general levy tax on businesses throughout the state, especially small businesses, but businesses generally. For those of you that don't know, we are so fortunate here in Minnesota to have so many numerous and generous programs and such a huge government that we have to take money from all kinds of creative ways, even beer taxes almost. But we also have I think we're either the only state or one of a handful of states that has something called a state general property tax. And what this means is, Rod, you're a small business owner and you own commercial industrial property, right? Rod and his wife farm, but say he's in town here in St. Charles and running, I have a shoe business in Winona, so Rod's running the shoe business, my competitor here in St. Charles. So on his building, not only does he get to pay property tax like residential people do or farmers do, but he pays for his county tax, he pays for the school tax, and then he pays for the city or the township tax. And actually, on a per unit basis or a per business basis, businesses pay more than both farmers and residences on those. And the farmers are next, and residents is paid the lowest amount per unit. So on top of that highest amount average, they get to pay, if you are a business in Minnesota, an additional property tax on top of that called a state general tax. Now that is a state-only property tax that is collected along with the local taxes, and it appears on the tax statement locally from your county auditor when you send it out to your, and it's collected with that, and then that money, it's $1.7 billion biennium throughout the state of Minnesota, goes directly to St. Paul to spend on numerous and generous programs in the state of Minnesota, never touching home here. And so if you look at that as a percentage, it's about between 25 and 35% of the business's property tax liability, and it is smoking our businesses in Minnesota and their ability to compete. So those were the two things we heard loudest, and we came forward then in 2015 with part of the tax bill, two bills of mine to address those two areas, and there were other members that also offered similar bills of different tweaks, and we came up with the best approach to each of them, and came forward through the session, had those as part of the tax bill, and in 2015, of course, we didn't have agreements to the tax bill didn't get heard. Now, in 2016, it did. And so what we saw come out of this last session that ended about the 22nd of May is two major fiscal bills. One was a tax bill. Now, it was no longer a $2.2 billion tax cut bill, which I would like to have done. Our surplus at the time was about 900 million. So it had gone from 1.9 billion to 900 million, right? It had been cut in half and then a little some beyond that. So this bill cut $551 million in taxes, of which 40% of it was that farm property tax cut and the one for the businesses throughout the state. I can talk more if you want detail how we crafted those later, because I don't want to consume too much time here. But two finance bills, $551 million tax cut and a garbage bill. Anybody know what a garbage bill is? A garbage bill is a spending bill full of everybody's treat and treasure to spending that any spender ever wanted. It's thrown all together in a whole collection. It's as ugly as a bonding bill. A bonding bill is a borrow and spend bill where everybody's got their project and they think they're going to have a little yellow ribbon cutting in their community and they're going to be a hero and look what I did. I confiscated this money on your behalf and now we're going to put this concrete out here. It's just like that in that you get all kinds of different little spending projects in there with different authors on each one. So the members in the House and Senate will author these bills and say Don is a member, right? And he's got a bill to spend $3 million on the refugee resettlement program because he likes it so much and it's going to help him in his community, right? I don't think that's the case, Don, but I had to get some humor in here. So
if we converted him to
So Don's got his bill, right? And then Bobby's got a bill. She's from northern Minnesota, and Bobby likes bike trails. And Bobby's going to build the Cuyuna Trail throughout northern Minnesota. She's going to be a hero, and she's going to come back with re-election, and she's going to be all over the magazines in northern Minnesota. She's going to be a hero. And then, there's a lot of Bobbies and Dons in the legislature. They all bring their little thing, and that one's $3 million, Bobby's is $1 million. Somebody else's is $4 million, somebody else's $500,000, and you add them all up, and suddenly you get to $230 million, and that's how much the garbage bill was. And it had, remember the Black Lives Matter stuff? They wanted to extort this money through the legislature and say, give us this money so we'll feel better about ourselves and we'll probably be back next time for more, of course. And there's disparities just because we happen to be, not white people or, somehow discriminated against, and you have your white privilege and you all should be guilty and then give us money. Anyway, that was their idea. And that was the governor's idea, too. He actually wanted, what was it, $50 million or something? I'm trying to remember what his amount was of money. Anyway, so we didn't have Black Lives Matter in there, but the Black Lives Matter idea was divided up into these different groups that somehow had, were fully engaged in the race to victimhood, and they, somehow said we are victimized by this or that, or history, or, the color of the sky is blue or something. Anyway, all of those little pieces there added up to, I think it's $35 million or something like that out of the $230 million. And then, of course, there's Bobby's project and Don's project and all the other ones. And there was one good piece in the garbage bill. One good piece. And there's only one good thing in my mind that happened this last, I had a little bill on manure pipes, which was really good. It wasn't significant, but it was really good, and it was important to rural Minnesota, to dairy farmers. But the one piece in there that was good is about $50 million of tax relief, and that is for our veterans. And so not only did we have the repeal of the income tax on the veterans pension in the tax bill, of course that $551 million tax bill we're talking about, the governor then vetoed after the session was done. And it was in there. But we also were able to park it in the garbage bill, which the Democrats want this bill. That's the one they want. They don't want the tax cut bill. They want to keep that money around so they can do another one of these next time. That's kind of the trick, you know. So we were able to negotiate it, and our caucus was instrumental. Representative Detmer from Forest Lake, who is our lead on the Veterans Committee, and a great man and a great leader, and he pushed very dramatically in our caucus and was able to get this into the garbage bill. And that's the one good thing that happened this session, is that was tucked in the middle of that $230 million spending bill, and we were finally able to get this passing. And we were talking earlier, I voted for this veterans pension income tax cut probably 8 or 10 times since I was first elected, and every time it goes into conference committee after it first passes the House. And then remember, conference committee get the House bill that comes from the House, the Senate passes theirs, they come together, and they make one bill out of them, and then it goes back to both bodies for final passage. When the Democrats are in control, they take that little provision in there and they kick it out in the conference committee so the final bill doesn't have it in when it goes back. And so they've done that. They've done it at least 6 times, I bet. Anyway, so that was a good thing. Is that it was in there, and that was about $50 million out of the $230 million was not garbage, but the rest. So it was a gold nugget in the middle of a bunch of garbage. Is what we had, and so that passed, and the tax bill passed. Both of them passed in the last week of session. And as you saw, after session had adjourned, the governor sat on the bills for a while. He signed the garbage bill with the gold nugget in it, and he vetoed the tax bill. He found one word in the tax bill. I think he must have hired an entire legion of staff in order to find it. Realized the tax bill was probably 400 or 500 pages long, and it's legal size both sides. And so they found one and that should have been an or an or that should have been an and. A mistake in the bill that was not made by any partisan person. It wasn't made by a Democrat or a Republican. It was a nonpartisan research staff upstairs in the state office building that works very, very hard, very long hours to get these bills ready. It's amazing what they can do. And so what has happened in past sessions under both Republicans and Democrat governors is the governor has signed the bill with an agreement from both the tax chair in the Senate and the tax chair in the House that was simply a grammatical mistake, and they signed the memo afterwards, and it's fine. And we've done it over and over again. The governor made a big deal of it, said it was going to be $100 million of impact and all this stuff, and he did it so that he had leverage for a special session. And guess what he wanted with that special session? The Democrats want more spending. More spending. Remember, there's 551 million plus there's a little more on top of that, and they wanted the light rail, the Southwest light rail. Yeah, and a bunch of spending on some other stuff. So we did not participate in that. Remember, it's the governor's constitutional authority to call a special session whenever he wants. And we have been seeing this thing, you guys, in Minnesota that really is troubling to me, and I think it might be to you too, in that our founders designed our state around a legislature, which is a legislative branch that passes bills and sends them to the governor for his approval or disapproval. And that's the way it's supposed to work. And when there's a need for a special session, it's identified by the governor. The Constitution explicitly says the governor is the only person that can call a special session. He calls it, and then the legislature comes into session and decides what the content of the bill will be, and when they will adjourn, and what the agenda will be during that legislative session. It's migrated from one that works like that to one that works like this. It says, okay, you are Speaker of the House, you are Governor, and I am Majority Leader in the Senate. We're going to get together and, who's Governor? You're Governor? Yeah. Okay. So you're going to say to us, the leaders of the two bodies, I'll call a special session, but you guys, we got to agree on what this is going to be. And I want this, and this, including Southwest Light Rail, to be part of the legislative, part of the special session. And you go back to all your members, and you guarantee me that that's going to pass, and we're going to have a lockbox agreement, and we're going to tell the public this is all that is going to happen during session. It's going to be confined to this, and this is what the bill is going to be, and I'll call this a session. That's where we've migrated to in the last several biennium, maybe 10 or 12 years. It's gotten worse and worse and worse, and this year is the worst that I've seen, and it's almost reflexive in that even the public now is coming to the belief somehow that all three leaders have to agree on the content before a special session is called. There's nothing like that in our governing documents. There's nothing like that in the way we're supposed to operate. The governor is supposed to call a session, the legislature pass a bill they think is proper for that situation, and the governor either sign or veto. That's the way it's supposed to work. But you got to have legislative leaders that are willing to say, hey, media, no, that's not our responsibility or authority. Governor Dayton can call a session whenever he wants. We're ready to go. I got the keys here and the gas tank's full. I'm going to St. Paul whenever he calls. That's what we should be doing. Anyway, sorry to digress, but I thought you might be interested in that. So that's really where we went fiscally this last year. We had a variety of other things happen. Unfortunately, we had a buffer bill, which is very, very bad for Minnesota farmers, instigated by the governor and the environmentalists, and we actually had people in our caucus that were pushing it as well. Republicans, believe it or not, I believe it is a constitutional taking. Our Constitution says that the government shall not take land without just compensation. And by the way, there's this thing called the Fifth Amendment that says something about the Gary too, isn't there? Somewhere. So that passed and was written into law, and I hope that it's challenged on its constitutionality because I think it's right for it. So those are some of the things that happened. Where do we go now? Where are we now? MNsure is, we talked about that, but MNsure is bubbling up big time. I'm trying to remember the website. Mike, do you remember Matt Dean's website with Charlie Dunker on it?
Oh, it was just on Facebook the other day. Yeah, the lost his wife.
Anyway, there's a guy from Southwest Minnesota who lost his wife because of MNsure. MNsure killed Gail Dunker, and there's an entire story out there. If you just Google MNsure Charlie Dunker or MNsure Matt Dean, Representative Matt Dean has it on his website. You can find it. And I encourage you to take a look at it. It's just an emotional story about how MNsure is hurting real Minnesotans in not only fiscal or financial ways, but other ways as well. So that issue is really big now as we're going into election. Property taxes are still a big issue, I think, for people, especially farmers and businesses. There's, I think, a strong expectation that the next legislature is going to go back and do something similar in the area of property taxes, and that the next legislature is going to go forward and do something to somehow restore some sanity to our health insurance situation that has completely been annihilated. So, by the way, the one little quip I have, and then we'll turn it over to Mike, is this. So you hear the Democrats out there saying, call us, Governor, back into session because we want to fix MNsure. So you don't hire the same doctor who committed malpractice on you the first time, right? I mean, Mike, you got to help me with that one. I got to deliver it a little better. How do you say it, Mike? After malpractice has been committed on you, do you hire the same doctor again? Maybe that's so. Anyway, so they think they're gonna come in and fix it. You know what they wanna do, of course, is they wanna take us to single payers. So, when 75% government's not enough, they wanna go to 100%. And just pour the coals on and make it full-fledged socialism in that part of the 1/6 of the economy. So that's their solution. Our solution is to, number one, kill it, and number two, bury it. Those are the two things we need to do, and then we can connect Minnesota with healthcare.gov, which is an architecture that actually works. MNsure's architecture doesn't function properly, and actually counties are picking up the load where you've got workers in counties that are on the phone and on their keyboard doing the work of getting people enrolled and keeping MNsure working right. That never was expected. This mandate's been placed on counties. It's somewhere between $8 and $27 million for Minnesota counties. So you can argue very quickly, accurate, and successfully that property taxes are also going up because of MNsure as well throughout pretty well every county in the state of Minnesota. So in addition to the other things I mentioned earlier, it's a disaster. We spent $400 million on it, and it still doesn't work. MNsure is also supposed to do the eligibility verification for $10 billion of federal and state Medicaid spending every year. And the legislative auditor identified very clearly that from the 1st of January of 15 through the end of May of 2015, that between $115 and $271 million of the people's money was wasted in the form that Medicaid benefits went to people that were not eligible for them. So you run the numbers, over $1 million a day is getting blown out the tailpipe onto the pavement, and it's rolling into the ditch, into the Minnesota ditch, and it's our money. And anyway, so I had a good speech on the floor and labeled it properly. That we've been knowing about this for years. That this has not been done, and I used my favorite term so far, Don, institutional corruption, repeatedly on the House floor, and the Democrats became red-faced, and I got over 100 votes on that amendment because indeed I had offered a similar bill the year before, and I cited the long litany of legislative auditor reports about this phenomenon. And so it ended up on the bill because they had to take the vote. They didn't want to be labeled institutionally corrupt on the next lit piece that came up. But then when it came to final global negotiations, the Democrats in the Senate nor the governor would take this fix that worked real well in both Illinois and Pennsylvania and implement it. So they're still in denial that there's a problem, even after legislative order came out with very hard and real numbers. So, anyway, I'm done talking, so Mike's turn. Or
I'm
Jim's
gonna let
turn.
Jim go. He's got an early morning tomorrow. He's gotta get rolling. So let him go.
Our next congressman.
Thank you for having me here. Appreciate all your work. It's nice to follow the future Speaker of the House or the future governor or the future senator. What are you going to be running for in the future?
I don't know, maybe dog catcher.
I don't know about that. We started out today in Bloor about 4 in the morning. Went up to St. Paul for an event for Jason Lewis, and we wanted to support him as best as we can. And he's running a strong race there, and he's a type that's he's in a dogfight. But looks like toss up. I think things are going to break our way the next 2 weeks. He'll get over the finish line, and we've been working real hard in this district to try to build the case, make the case get known across the district, and make sure people know about Tim Walz and his record. How you been, Doc? You haven't seen him in a while. And so the reason we're running is probably the reason you're here. We kind of all get the sense that the way I put it is this is a now or never election. We either win now, make big changes in places like Washington, D.C. and St. Paul, or we're never going to live in the country we grew up in. We're never going to have the United States of America as it was envisioned by the forefathers. We are going to lose our country. I truly believe that. I think the stakes are that high. And people say, and I said, people can explain it to me otherwise, but Forget about just the massive debt that Hillary Clinton will pour on this country. Forget about the massive takeover of healthcare that will continue, the takeover of energy, the takeover of financial services that will continue under Hillary Clinton. Forget about all of those things. The one thing that really makes the difference is the Supreme Court. And if she puts someone in there to replace Justice Scalia, that's the fifth vote, for instance, to take away our individual right to keep and bear arms. And that's just the start. When she puts one or two or three more on the court, we become California. Every good idea we have is invalidated, unconstitutional. Every bad idea the Democrats have is validated. It goes on. First thing that they're going to do if Hillary wins and Scalia is replaced is all of a sudden this unconstitutional amnesty will become amnesty. And we'll have 20 million people that are here illegally who will become citizens, who will start flooding into our country and our voting booths and make it almost impossible for us, I believe, to win another presidential election, to win most elections in our country. So that's just the beginning. That's where it goes. It sounds depressing because, frankly, it is. That's where we are. We've got to win this election. Donald Trump has to win this election. Hillary Clinton wins, we are in big trouble. People ask me, do you support Trump? Yes, I support Trump. I'm voting for Trump. I encourage everyone to get out and vote for Trump because I think we lose the country if he doesn't win. Now, what are we going to do when we win? Well, we're going to start defending this country. That hasn't been happening recently. It hasn't been happening even from people on both sides of the aisle. And we have to secure our borders. We have to make sure that we're protected from Islamic extremism. We have a terrorist recruiting problem in Minnesota right now from the existing terrorists that are here under the existing vetting process. And that doesn't come from any of us in this room. That comes from Andrew Lugar, the U.S. Attorney for President Obama in Minnesota, who says Minnesota has a terrorist recruiting problem. Also in our country, we have 1,000 ongoing ISIS investigations. Right now, at least one in every state. This is a serious problem. Now, what has Tim Walz been doing over the years on this? Open borders. So he supports amnesty. He supports massive flood of refugees into the United States, into Minnesota. That's a pre-9/11 mindset. We're running against him hard on that issue. I'm on the other side. It's time to secure the borders. And when it comes to the refugees, I said we should have a refugee resettlement program timeout. We need to figure out what's going on before we continue to add to the problem. And we also need to have safe zones in war-torn areas so we can protect the refugees, but also protect the American people. That's where we are on that issue. Hopefully we won't have any more terrorist attacks, but, we've had plenty of them, and that issue is on the minds of the voters. A lot different than 2 years ago when ISIS was just starting. 2 years ago, about this time, President Obama made a speech to the nation about ISIS in that election. And everybody said, well, I guess he's got a plan, trust but verify, but we'll let him go. Well, since then, they've moved into 20 or 30 countries. Refugee problems, we've suffered the attacks here. So that's a big difference from last election to this election when we were on the ballot. We're also looking at another issue that has unfortunately risen its ugly head, and that is a struggling farm economy. I'd say that our farm economy in southern Minnesota is moving into recession. You can't go very far and talk to farmers, grain farmers, livestock farmers, people in rural communities, people on Main Street, small businesses, and see that they're not struggling. The commodity prices are low, the input costs remain high, and the burdens, unfortunately, from government continue to make it tougher and tougher on our farmers. Now, I grew up on a farm over by Truman. My dad, grandfather, great-grandfather, they were all Minnesota farmers. And we get it, farming's up, farming's down. It's high risk, not always high reward, high capital. But what we don't get is why a guy who represents this rural district goes out to Washington and votes for extremist EPA regulations that hurt farmers and drive up costs. Why he's voting for things like the carbon tax and very expensive energy policies that drives up the cost on our farmers. Why he votes for things like Obamacare, which has become one of the biggest line items on any farmer's budget as they're going. And why he supports all of these anti-farming, anti-rural policies. Here's another one, the debt tax. When farmers have to sell out, when the farm families sell out, they sell out to bigger operators. Bigger operators are not bad people, but it means there's probably fewer people holding the land in southern Minnesota, fewer people in our rural communities. That puts a strain on our rural communities, and it means that we're not going to be as prosperous and affluent, our businesses will dry up and so forth. Why is Tim Walz voting for all this junk? Can't figure it out. The neighboring congressman in the 7th District, a Democrat, Colin Peterson, he's on the other side. He's with me. He says we need regulatory reform. The House and the Senate should have to affirm major regulations before they're imposed on you. It shouldn't come right out of the EPA and Obama. It should be the people's body. Let's take that power back from the regulatory agencies and give it back to the people's representatives. That would make some sense. Get rid of this death tax. Let's replace Obamacare. We'll talk about that in just a second. And let's have some energy policies that make sense to keep downward pressure on the cost of energy, because when we have expensive energy, it really doesn't help anyone. Makes us less competitive, takes money out of your pocket, and drives up the cost of living. So Tim Walz and I, we don't agree on much. I don't think Tim Walz and you agree on much either. And that's kind of how we run the race. The issue that we've been advertising across the district on for over almost a month now is Obamacare. And we've been on that issue for 3 years. Actually more than that, but for 3 years in this race. And we said from the beginning, this thing isn't going to work. It's a disaster. It's going to drive up costs. It's going to drive doctors out of business. It's going to make the insurance companies go broke. And it's doing all that stuff. And so we had debates against Walz in Mankato and Winona and Rochester here a couple weeks ago. And in the Mankato debate, the guy made another gaffe. He blamed the Mayo Clinic for his Obamacare bill. He said, you know, he said, wow. And we were hammering him on it. He said, so, well, you know, the Mayo Clinic said the previous system wasn't sustainable. And I'm like, yeah, but the Mayo Clinic didn't want 50,000 pages of regulations raining down on medicine, raining down on dentists, raining down on the industry, the health insurance industry. The Mayo Clinic didn't want us to convert millions of people from private insurance to government insurance, which pays doctors and hospitals 30 cents on the dollar. The Mayo Clinic didn't want all these rural hospitals run out of business. The Mayo Clinic didn't want a loss of doctor-patient relationship, even at its own clinic. So I don't know, I said, well, I don't think they had that in mind, this whole Obamacare thing. You really shouldn't be blaming the Mayo Clinic. He said a lot of stupid things about Obamacare, but the dumbest thing he's ever done is vote for it. And it's really hurting the people, unfortunately. And we see people paying $20,000, $25,000 for premiums with deductibles so high, the underlying insurance is worthless. And you see people who are leaving jobs and taking jobs only because of insurance. It's a complete disaster. It needs to be replaced. We support private and free market reforms. They're on my website. Anybody wants me to go through them, we can. But we're fighting very hard on that issue, and he's in a lot of trouble. And so I think recently, almost all the candidates running legislative races in Minnesota have started to move to that issue. Is that in the last week, 10 days? Someone told me that maybe there was a memo that went out that said if you were going after a Democrat on another issue, maybe you should just start on that one. Is that kind of the way it works?
It's been maybe 2, 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Okay.
When the tentative rates came on, and people woke up at that point.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate. Nobody wants to revel in people's struggles and all that. But the Democrats, they don't care. Walz voted for this thing 7 years ago. Walz held a town hall on health care 7 years ago. You might have been at one of those town halls. He hadn't held one since. He didn't care. He didn't say anything. And so in our debate, he said, well, we've got to do something about these people. There's 5% of the people in the market that are being hurt. And I said, Congressman, if you think that this is only affecting 5% of the people, you're 100% wrong. Not affecting a lot of people, small businesses, dentists, and others. So we're banging it down on that one. We're beating them up, and we're going to continue that all the way through the election. Another issue that we contrast with Walz on pretty strong is veterans. And he's a veteran. He served in the National Guard. I respect his service. But his service in the Guard hasn't translated into informed votes on House floor. And his service in the Guard hasn't translated, unfortunately, into things that he's done in Congress that have helped veterans. In fact, they're worse off today than when he went to office 10 years ago. And worse yet, he doesn't support the solutions that are going to help our veterans. Two that we support that he's opposed to. One is, let's have the VA be accountable. So when a bureaucrat at the VA, for misconduct, abuses a veteran, whatever, makes a mistake, well, that veteran should be fired or demoted within 30 days, maybe 60 days. We'll we'll give them 60. The current process is 700 and some days. They never get fired. Well, Walz voted against that bill because he said it was a right to work issue for the VA employees. This is quote that he made. And I said, no, it was a right to life issue for the veterans. He and I are completely different, big contrast. The second contrast is that, look, at any one time, there's over 500,000 veterans waiting more than 30 days in the VA system to get an appointment. Unfortunately, veterans have died at the hands of the U.S. government from neglect, misconduct, and other things. The system isn't working. We have to open it up and let our veterans choose their own doctors and hospitals and get the timely quality medical care that they deserve, that they've earned. He doesn't think that's a good idea. He opposes that. Hillary Clinton opposes that. Donald Trump and I support it. That'd be something I'd work with him on to make sure that that would happen. I think that's imperative. Congressman Walz gets to go choose his own doctor. Congressman Walz doesn't have to travel long distances. Congressman Walz can go to any hospital in the country. And by the way, he promised he was going to live under Obamacare just like you. And he gets a 75% subsidy from some special deal that they have for Congress out there. He pays about $500 a month with a $350 deductible. That's not living under it just like you. That sounds like one set of rules for Tim Walz and another set of rules for the rest of us, and that sounds a lot like Hillary Clinton. So the last thing that we run on that's different from 2 years ago is the Second Amendment. Frankly, it's on the ballot. And if the Democrats win, we're going to lose that. And I strongly support the Second Amendment and also the right to life and the right to religious freedom. If we have to fight for those basic rights, I would do that as a member of Congress, by and large. Walz and I, if we both get A's from the NRA, he gets the endorsement because he's the incumbent. But when it comes to Gun Owners of America, I get the A and he gets the F. That's the one we'll use for this election. So with that, we're just out working. We're shaking as many hands as possible. 21 counties, we're organized across the district. I really appreciate all the signs that you put up around here. I know you've been divvying them out. We did some door-to-door in this area, walk and drop literature. Coming down from St. Paul this morning, I saw a lot of both of your signs. So they're working all the way down 52 and moving it right into this area. So I think the party and the Republicans are energized, maybe a little bit under the radar. The national media doesn't want to talk about that. I think a week or two from now, you're going to see a difference in this presidential race. Let's hope we get it done. We have to win. Let's take back our country and restore America's greatness. All right, thanks very much. And if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And after that, I'm going to head back to work. What's that? Oh, sure, it's not too much trouble. Anyway, it sure is nice to be here. All right, look forward to listening to you. You bet. You bet.
Hi. How's it going, Mike Goggin? We had a lot of discussion about our veterans tonight, so in honor of our veterans and our military service people, we can just take a moment to stand up, take our hats off, let's say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate that. I got an update that's 9C-17 in the military right now, and he said they're basically fixing them with baling wire and bubble gum. They just don't have parts. The Obama administration's pretty much decimated our military to that point. But I suppose you guys are all wondering what I've been up to. I finally got off of work about a week and a half ago, so I'm full-time into the campaign. I'm on vacation through the election. I hit the doors like crazy. I work 40, 50-hour weeks, and I hit the doors after work. It's been really encouraging out there. The people are really responsive to what I have to say, to the message I have. I'm not going to go through everything that Steve had. He just forgot one tax. The Democrats want to get a 16.5-cent gas tax too. So, but anyways, polls. I don't know what the polls are, but the poll I run under is I'm 10 points behind, and I'm on money. That's my model. So that's how I run. I'm just hit the doors, talk to the people. It's the best thing I can do. Work with the people and talk to them, answer their questions. I was over in Goodview this morning after I got done with the Winona Daily News interview that I had. I was with Jeremy Miller, and so we knocked about 200 doors this afternoon before it started raining. Really good response on the doors that we knocked. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and my opponent is desperate. Right now, they had him up at the Capitol writing the tax credit bill that they want to get through, which is another subsidy on top of the subsidy to throw Band-Aids at it for the miniature. Okay? He's also out talking that he's a conservative candidate running. Yesterday I was in Cannon Falls. I got a phone call from a gentleman, and he left a message on my phone and said, we had a Schmidt sign in our yard, but then we looked up on the website after you dropped your card off at my door today, we want one of your signs. Because he's against everything we want. We believe in. And they're teachers. And he prides himself on being the son of retired teachers. So he's desperate. And I get him really good with the warehouse tax and revenue shoe. I got him a little miffed a couple weeks ago in Goodview. He blew up on me in the middle of that discussion. And so he's nervous. He's running scared. But like I said, I don't know what the polls are, but I do know what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of negative ads against me in the mail, on the radio, on TV. That's a really good sign. Keep hammering them out there, throw those all like crazy. The people that know me know it's not true. The other thing, I've picked up another staffer for 4 days a week through the election. So that's a good sign. Sunday, this coming Sunday, we've got a group coming down from the Senate Victory Fund. They're going to be door knocking in Redmond. They're also coming down on the 5th of November to do more door knocking. So that's good. Steve has been great. We've got all you folks here. I can't say thank you enough for everything you're doing for us, and for me especially, because I really appreciate that. It means the world to me, and I'm earning your trust, and that's what it's all about. Trust and respect, and I've got to earn it. It's not given; it's earned. So. But the big thing is, like we said, MNsure, that's the number one thing at the door, healthcare. What are you going to do about healthcare? And we've got to fix it. We've got to work with our federal representatives. Hopefully Mr. Hagedorn will be in, so we can get legislation through the federal to clean up the Affordable Care Act and hopefully kill it and bury it too, so that we can make the reforms here in Minnesota that we need, so that we can all have good quality health care at reasonable affordable prices. But for that, I'm having a great time with this, to be honest with you. I really enjoy it. People think I'm crazy because I like the door knocking, and it's fun to meet people and talk to the people, see what's on their minds, see what their issues are, and then let them know. I fix things. That's what I do. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm a project manager. I fix things. I make things better. And it's like I told the Winona Daily News this morning in the interview. I said, I'm going to take all that I learned working with Redmond Shoe Company and retail stores across the country, working as an electrical engineer and working as a certified project manager. Take all those skills and talents and the techniques that I've learned over the years and take that to the Senate so we can come up with, as my opponent likes to say, pragmatic solutions. Unfortunately, I don't know if there was any pragmatic solutions in 13 and 14. But there was one in the election in 14. People wised up and used common sense and at least got the House under Republican control. So now we got to get the Senate. As Steve said, we need to flip 6 seats, and mine is Senate 21 that we're in. That's one of the seats that the Republicans are looking for. So I don't give up. I don't quit. You tell me I can't do something, I'm going to prove you that I can. People told me when I was 38 years old and I quit my job, went to school full-time for an electrical engineering degree. They thought, said, there's no way, you're too old. 2 years later, I was walking down the aisle getting my cap and gown, getting my diploma. And I had my 2 boys there watching me. The greatest moment of my life, outside of marrying my wife and having my kids born. But I don't give up. That's me. I keep pushing. I will keep working to find solutions. I do that with projects at work. I pick up. I tend to be the one project manager that gets the projects that are in trouble that nobody wants. I like it. It's a good challenge. And I'd like to know that I can figure things out, that I can get the right people together with the right solutions and get a cost-effective, good solution implemented at the plant. So that's what I'm going to do at the legislature. I'm going to do that in the Senate. Because number one, I'm not there for party. I'm there for the people of Senate District 21. I will always default to that on any vote. And I know it might cause some problems with the party leadership from time to time, but I don't know, I work at a nuclear plant. I got pretty thick skin. Doesn't bother me at all. And I got a pretty good glow too after 12 years. But, you know, the bottom line is we just got to make common sense legislation. We don't have, sometimes doing nothing is the best thing. As Steve said, you know, we could have went into the session this year just after the first day adjournment, everybody went home. And we'd be in a lot better position now than what we got with the additional spending. And that is Governor Dayton on it. So, but we need to keep the House, we need to get the Senate under our control because we've got 2 years left to go in the goofy or crazy guys date, whichever one you want to call them. So for that, I'm going to leave it open. I'm going to leave it open. You guys can ask me any questions. Yes, sir.
Where does Minnesota rank as far as the tax?
Oh, as far as the ranking,
Yeah.
we're number 3. I think we're number 3 overall. No, not overall. We're number 5 or 6, I think it is.
There's a lot of different measures. One of them, if you look at all combined taxes, has us right about 10 or 11. Income tax, I think we're down about 3 or 4. Business taxes in the business environment, we're by 3 or 4. Those would be the 3rd or 4th highest. Business taxes were about dead last in terms of if number 1 is the best business environment, number 50 is the worst. We come in repeatedly at 45, 46, 47. The best I've seen there is 39. But one was at 49. So we're very, very high tax state, and it's gotten worse. It goes back to the decades of control, especially in the state Senate. In the last 40 years, we've had the state Senate for 2 years, in 2011 and 12. Outside of that, the Democrats have had it for 40 years. And so you look at issues like the education funding gap, where Minneapolis and St. Paul get 40% more per kid than our schools do out here from the state government. It's because of the rigid amounts, the repeated Democratic control up there. Again, remember, the Democrat caucus, whether in the House or the Senate, is controlled by the Metro members. Minneapolis and St. Paul have such a large portion of their caucus that dictates their agenda. And so you'll look at the education numbers. When we had control of the House and the Senate in 11 and 12, that funding gap, we were able to shrink it a little bit. And then the Democrats took control and went back out again. And now this last year we were able to shrink it just a hair, not very much, because we only had 1 house. So that's the thing. I just want to comment. Mike has a great shot at winning here, you guys. The things he mentioned. So the Democrats are throwing. He's a challenger. Remember, Schmidt's the incumbent, and the supporters of the incumbent are throwing grenades at Mike, and very, very poorly designed ones, of course. So they say things like, "Well, Mike hangs out with Tea Party guys like me," and
I have no problem with that.
and so I mean, when you say he's bad because of who he relates to or who he hangs out with or who he talks to, there's not a lot of political impact to that. Very weak efforts. You can almost smell money burning when those things come forward. But so what that says is the Democrats are concerned about the race and realize that the caucuses and the outside interest groups all do polling. Now, Mike's campaign didn't do polling. I'm not aware of any particular polling. But those groups have done polling, and they educate their behavior. So when they're throwing money at and trying to knock his knees out from under him, that's because they are threatened and they believe they have a chance of losing. When the Senate Republican caucus sends another staffer down to help Mike out, that's because they believe they have a shot at winning the race. So both sides are saying this race is tight. I would guess it's within a point or two either way, or maybe 3. There's a great shot to win, and just kind of, and I've been doing whatever I can to help Mike, but my sense is, and Mike's got strong name ID in Red Wing. His family's got a long list of accomplishments there. His dad was very well known and very beloved. He was the president of Red Wing Shoes, and they just loved him to death. And they love Mike too, but they loved his dad more.
They definitely did.
And so if the polls are that close, this is just me now thinking, okay, if the polls are that close, Mike's got to be doing very well in Red Wing, is my guess, because of that name ID. And the place he has disadvantage is further away he gets from Red Wing, because Schmidt has had more time out here to meet people and get name saturation than Mike has. So places like St. Charles is where we can make a difference with Mike Goggin. As a matter of fact, we reviewed the numbers in 4 years ago when Howe ran against Schmidt. Howe lost St. Charles. Remember that? The Republican lost St. Charles in the Senate race 4 years ago. Now, I didn't mean to instill shame in you guys here today. A Democrat won here? You've got to be kidding me. But he did. And so if we can take, for instance, those numbers and provide a reciprocal result this time in St. Charles, that can have a huge impact on the race. And I mean, you guys have done a great job and a great start here, getting out a very good signage. I think we outsigned them pretty well in town. We can still put up some more. Cindy and others have been starting to do some lip dropping. So if you or others, and maybe sons or daughters or neighbors or grandchildren can help, people with young legs, Gary, and we'll take your legs too, Gary, but people and his legs are out working already, the way it sounds. So, I mean, we can use all the help we can these last 2 weeks, and I don't know how much of St. Charles you got done, but it would be great to lip drop the entire town, which is about, 2,200 households or something like that. I'm trying to remember the numbers, but over 2,000 households in the city of St. Charles. That would be a great way not only for you guys and others to get engaged, but for us to help Mike win this race.
Yeah, anything you can do for me, I'd really appreciate it. What you've done so far has been fantastic. I really appreciate that, but we've got 2 more weeks to go, and we've got to keep hitting it hard. That's it.
And I don't know how much good it does him or what he does, but I do know that he's been meeting with the school board here in town 2 or 3 times at least within the last year. And I don't know, he just talks about what they did up in the session, and I'm sure it's what the Democrats have did, it isn't what you guys have done. And I'm not saying, I suppose you have to call and make an appointment that you can be there. But I'm sure that he's painting a pretty nice picture for the Democrats at the school board.
And they've invested $2 billion into education. I'd like to see where it all went.
Yeah, and it's harder for a challenger to get those venues built.
Well, I'm just saying,
but it can be done. And one thing you grant Schmidt is that, and he's not working a real job right now. He's out there full-time campaigning.
and I guess if you would call or and you try and get into a meeting and they say no, then let me know so I can go up to the school board and say, why aren't you letting these people in to talk just as much as Smith?
And in most school districts, he would be talking when he goes there directly to his base probably, except in St. Charles, you have a lot of conservative teachers here, so that's probably not quite the case. I think you're probably a mix here, pretty even one, I guess.
But if they won't let you in, I guess then you have to just tell me and I'll go up and meet with them, find out why. But I know that he also is here, I think, once a month out at Cabin Coffee, just for an hour on a Saturday.
And Don mentioned
Letters
letters.
to the editor by locals to be good. I don't know if the headlines of the St. Charles Press is fair or not, but I do know that they will not run any negative letters. It can only be positive in support of a candidate.
Yeah, so maybe if 1 or 2 of you be willing to send in a letter to the editor of St. Charles Press in the next week, before next Monday comes, that would be another thing that people could do.
Yeah, I know the Republican Eagle and Red Wing is deadline is Monday at 0800 for letters to the editor. Then they're not accepting anymore between that and the election.
We're starting to switch up.
Yep.
Cindy, how much of St. Charles is done? Lit dropping?
Oh,
Who all went? You and Lene and Gary and
yeah, and Bobby,
Bobby too?
I know the golf course is all done.
yep. Yep.
So there's still quite a bit to do yet?
The area that I was doing isn't done, and so if anybody wants to help me,
Yeah.
I was working south of the railroad tracks and west of Whitewater. I did some out in Northern Hills, that's all done.
Okay, so is that area down below too, the newer area down below from Northern Hills?
Lene, I don't know if Lene got all that done.
I doubt she
She was
did.
working south of 14, or north of 14. No, north of, she was gonna go up to the railroad tracks, and that way.
Sounds like you guys want to get a map and kind of color it in so you kind of know where you got, right?
Yeah, I do have a map, but I don't know, I didn't get back with Lene to find out what she got done.
Yeah, she said that, from Bluff Avenue to the high school needs to be done yet.
Okay.
Did you guys have Hagedorn lit too?
We did not, but I have some.
We should
can,
include that.
Yes.
I'm all out, so don't worry about mine.
no, I got stuff, so, not a huge number, but.
Okay?
Does everyone understand that a literature drop is not knocking on, door knocking, that all you have to do is?
You just walk up the door, put the door on, the literature on the door, and you go to the next one.
Yeah.
Quiet as a mouse.
And I interacted with some people, I got real favorable on it. My God, and especially with the daycare, but.
Good, so people recognize that.
Well, you can let them know that, I've got the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce endorsement, Minnesota Farm Bureau, National Federation of Independent Businesses, and MCCL, pro-life, so let them know. And there's a reason why Schmidt doesn't have the first three, because even though he's a prominent small businessman in Redwood, lifelong resident, he doesn't understand business, he doesn't know what his policies are doing for the businesses and the workers and paychecks. Farmers, he has no clue what the impacts are.
Although he's not going to work in his business now, right? He's pretty old campaigning full time now.
Yeah, except when he's doing broadband stuff.
Yeah, so this guy authored the broadband bill to appropriate money to the broadband grant program. At the same time, he is a consultant for broadband and consults with the very cities that can apply for this money. Isn't that one nice?
Is it 100 million?
That's what
His bill was 100 million, and I think they funded
35.
35 million in the bonding bill. But he doesn't regard that as an dirt bill.
So, and as I tell people, broadband isn't just fiber optic. If you ever work with fiber optic, you cut that line, you gotta put splices in. And each time you do that, you get more and more noise on the line and less reliability. So, I have a coworker of mine that retired from the plant as an electrician, and he owns a farm on 61 west of Redmond. And he actually had AT&T or Verizon, or one of them guys, they built a cell phone tower on his property. And so he gets a stipend for that, and everybody else gets the opportunity to have more access to wireless. And that's an option we should be looking at. Don't limit it just to fiber optic, which is good. It's good. We use it a lot out at the power plant. That's what we've pretty much gone to in a lot of things. But we shouldn't limit ourselves out in the rural area when you could go put a few towers in and cover a much wider area with less impact on the environment, less things like that. And then also you look at the potential for the satellite as well. So,
Hey, one good nugget for you guys here in St. Charles. So I was down by Whitewater State Park, right? And the Vetter family down there, you guys know the Vetters, right? They gave or sold some of the original land to the park.
Is that related to McCarthy?
Chuck's sister. Yeah. So there's a 6-acre piece of property right next to there, right? And the state park and the DNR continues to want to gulp up more and gulp up more. They bought a 6-acre piece of property from a guy that wanted to sell it. It's got a $200,000, like 5-year-old house on it. And our DNR paid $300 and some thousand for the property. With a $200,000 house on there. Roger, what are we gonna do? I'm gonna author a bill first day of session to sell the property. Not yet. Rumor is that I talked to the county assessor, he said it is the weirdest and stupidest thing I've ever seen. But they want 6 acres and they're willing to, it's your money, folks, it's just other people's money, it's not shopping, right? It's amazing. So Rod, I'm gonna sell it, do you like that bill?
Yeah, go ahead. You hear about that piece of ground that's sold on the other side of the dump road there, that's 46 acres, I heard it was close to $250,000 and you can't build a house on it, it's just deer hunting ground.
The DNR boy.
No. These trophy hunters, they're taking all the ground, there's no place, I'm on the new deer planning management thing, and I'm one of the two from agriculture, and everybody I talked to, especially the young people, said there's no reason to hunt anymore because there's no place to hunt.
So it's already happening.
There's trophy management that has come in, there's only the elitists can hunt. That's what we've got with this management.
Remember the 4-point rule? We were fighting that a few years ago and lost. They're telling hunters that if it's a buck, it has to have more than 4 point.
4 points on the side.
It's got to have 4 points on the side or bigger in order to shoot it. See, I can't even remember what the law is. Good thing I hunt in Wisconsin where you don't have to worry about it. But it's got to have 4 points on the side or bigger, or you can't shoot it. You're in violation if you shoot it. So the idea was the bow hunters wanted bigger bucks, so they want to force everybody to not shoot those bucks so that they can get 1 step bigger the next year. And then, like Rod's point out, what happens is you get these bucks with much bigger racks, and then people from further away start seeing them, and they bring their big money from Milwaukee and Minneapolis, and they buy the land and they take away the right for people to hunt that have hunted there for years. So it's interesting that it's happening that quickly.
Land for hunting that's
And
non-farmable,
leases,
basically non-cropland, sells for more than cropland.
And a lot of farmers will lease it out too and lock it
Oh,
up.
that's the other, the rest of it's leased, pretty much all, the whole valley down from
So lease it out
is
for hunting,
all.
so the same people can't hunt there.
leased.
It's a local scheme. Anyway, so I'm glad you're on the deer group, and the good thing about that land sale is it wasn't your money being used to buy it. That's the only good thing.
Yeah. But, said, if it would have been my money, then it would have went off the property tax rolls too.
Yeah.
That's where we got
Yeah,
it.
that's pretty sad.
So I'd be taxed for all the school.
You get to pay more.
I get to pay
Because it was
more
paid for with
every
your
time
money.
every time the DNR buys something, I get to pay more taxes.
Yes.
A few years ago, I heard that there was a suggestion that Social Security not be taxed by the state. Has that disappeared completely?
We had that as part of the $2.2 billion tax bill that we passed in 2015. So it was in there. We had several versions of it in the House, but we did have a full repeal of it over a number of years. I can't remember, 20% of it in the first 2 years or something like that. That was in there. It wasn't in the final one that we had in 2016, because remember that tax cut bill went from $2.2 billion in tax cuts down to $551 because we had less money left over in the structural surplus. But we wanted to put the Social Security income tax repeal into the 2016 one, but interestingly enough, and you might think I'm just being partisan here, but Governor Dayton and the Democrats didn't want it in the bill, and we've heard that over and over again, and so it didn't get included in the bill. So I asked why, and they had, apparently their impression of people on Social Security is that they're largely rich people that and continue to pay that.
Oh, really?
So that's their impression. Interestingly enough, I'm on the tax committee in the House, and we heard this bill, several of them, 3 or 4, Representative Lomer had one, Representative Barrett and some others, to cut the, we're one of like 6 or 10 states that taxes Social Security benefits. Insane. Of course, we're one of only a handful of states that taxes many things because we tax so many things. But this tax is especially onerous because the interaction that it has and the way it works is it's structured in a way that when you have Social Security income, and it is getting taxed at whatever rate that is. I don't have the tables in front of me. But if you go out and work another job and you have regular income that's not Social Security income, the more you make here, the more this rate on Social Security goes up. So you are disincentivized to work because of the way the social income tax on Social Security is structured. It's insane.
Yeah.
We're disincentivizing work among people on Social Security.
I don't
And
understand
so-
why some of the Democrats don't realize that they're driving people away. Why don't
Oh, we
they
bring it
think
up, I brought it up in committee and talked about it ad nauseum, and, you know,
And I
They
hear
want
that
the money.
word
They
all
want
the time
the-
about Social
they
Security.
want the money in
tax.
government.
I'm hearing a lot of that at the doors, and, people are saying, well, why are we being taxed on Social Security? Well, we need to get us in there so we can get rid of that tax. Because that's just wrong. I mean, we're at the mercy of the federal government, whatever our Social Security is gonna be. But next year you get 4.4% more, so.
Yeah.
There was 0 last year, right?
Have to try to find something to do.
0.3 now? Okay, so there were
I was at a
0.4.
state planning seminar, and they said Minnesota's the only state that this lady knew of was giving it, says it taxes your life insurance.
Yeah.
What do you think about
We're
that?
taxing life insurance.
When you die.
We'll see you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
Went out to Hawks.
Yeah, I saw that.
The lady, there was a lawyer
So he
from
taxed
Winona
it.
to give the talk.
So if there is a life insurance disbursement at death, it's taxed. Well, is it taxed as part of your estate at that point?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
as part of your estate, it's taxed. And she said it was the only state that done that.
So in other states, they separate it from the estate
I
before
guess
they
so.
apply it in the state tax.
She didn't explain how it went, but she
Okay.
That's the other thing, is we need to at least get our estate tax to the federal level. Preferably get rid of it, but, at least get it moved up.
We had it in the tax bill, it would put the exemption at $5.1 million.
Because right now it's at, 1.6.
Yeah, it's not quite the two, somewhere.
I think it's 1.6, can go to 1.8, and ultimately 2. It's like every 2 years it goes up to 200,000. We dealt with that with the state tax.
We're hearing how the election is rigged and the voting machines are rigged and how does that affect our local election? Is that
Well, fortunately for us, we've got paper ballots. Texas is having, here in Texas is having problems with their electronic ballot. I have a brother that's a computer programmer, he said you can have any kind of computer program you want, and you can still manipulate it, and do it, and change it, so, I'm a firm believer in the paper ballot. Because then you have your Democrats, Republicans, represented, validated in that. So, maybe a little more labor
Not
intensive.
forever, though.
The integrity of the voting. Because I can't afford that, so I'll just have to. I would never vote for electronic vote on the web, anything.
That thing is they get left in people's trunks.
Sugar shaker.
Cindy's got a talk, so we've talked enough.
Just a couple things. Today, I believe it was Hannity said that there's a possibility that Republicans could take Minnesota. It's been 40 years. They're in place. say anyway, there's a possibility. So, and every little vote counts, you know, whether it's a neighbor down the street or whatever, maybe somebody needs a ride, we just gotta,
KSTP had a poll commission, it was just announced the day before yesterday. In the 8th Congressional District, which is northern Minnesota, the Iron Range, what do we know about the Iron Range? Solid Democrat, right? So Stuart Mills is running there against Nolan, right? And there's probably ads that you've seen even down here. The Iron Rangers are the type of working people that Trump is attracting. I mean, we obviously have those down here, many of them are conservative people, but the Iron Rangers are that type of blue collar. We're going to bring jobs back. We're going to America first, which is we all agree with. And he's up on the Iron Range in the 8th district. Trump is up by 12% right now. That's what that poll said.
there's a lot of big stuff
And
going
then
on
he's,
right now.
and then get this, in the 3rd district, which is, you know, Plymouth and western Hennepin County out there, where Eric Paulson is our Republican congressman, Hillary's ahead by 13. So you've got really some weird dynamics going on here. Those Republicans in that district are very much squishy establishment. I still like to spend a lot of Republicans, but it's the Republicans have carried it, you know, for the last, I mean, for quite some time. But it's the flip side there because, you know, they're, I suppose a lot of them, Trump's a little bit coarse for them. Not too coarse for the guys and gals on the range, though, I can tell you that. So, some interesting dynamics, and Cindy's right. It's the average, I think, that Real Clear Politics got Minnesota at 5%. Clinton ahead by 5%, which is not a lot.
And some areas, some of these polling, they're only polling like 27% Republicans. So there's a lot of squishy room in there for, you know, and they're, right now it looks like the mainstream media is trying to depress our voter turnout by making it seem like we don't have a chance. Right today, down in Florida, they started the early voting. They had blocks, the lines of people, 2 to 3 blocks long, and there's an awful lot of Trump hats on them. So there's good stuff happening out there, and could be like the Reagan election where Carter was supposed to be 11 points ahead in the polls, and it got called by 8:30 in the evening for Reagan.
It's going to come down. It's going to come down to voter turnout.
Yep. And everybody
as we go out there, it's very interesting. So I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but the Democrats' energy level is almost zero right now. It's somewhere between 0 and 10% of what it normally is, or between 0 and 10% of the max. So if 100% is up there, theirs is right here, right? Ours is not up here either. It might be about here. So we're about here, they're about here. And there's been years where it's been the reciprocal of that, where theirs is much higher than ours. So we're, even though our energy level isn't as quite as high as it needs to be, and we need to trump it up, pun intended, in order to be successful. But we are light years ahead of where they're at. I saw my first sign for Hillary Clinton in Wabasha County like a week ago.
Yeah.
And that was the first one I saw.
I saw 5 or 6 of them on Pill Hill, but that's about it in Rochester.
And usually that's got hundreds.
So it's getting out the voting. Last night, Mr. Trump had 25,000 people at a rally. Tim Kaine had one, I believe it was 200 or 300. And this is, they're doing small groups. Mr. Trump is bringing them in, and to say that those people won't turn up at the polls is ludicrous. They're waiting sometimes 8 hours to get into these events. They give up a whole day, you know, between traveling and waiting in line to get in. Those people are committed, and they're trying to say, nah, they won't show up at the polls. I think they're wrong. You don't give that much and then just let it go. So everything you
How
can
many
do.
surveys I've filled out on the iPad?
Every